So after about 5 months and 14 episodes, I thought I'd do a bit of a breakdown, get Louise to do a recap on the whole show. So you can see here now the car in bare metal. There was quite a bit of work we needed to do to get some of the factory body lines to line up. And that included cutting and shutting some panels, edges of bonnets and those sorts of things. And Adam had already done the door gaps on the car by adding extra metal. And in doing that, it actually pulled the panels a bit. So what I managed to do was to use the hammer and dolly there to actually take that pressure from the heat process of being welded to get it to flatten out, so that when we actually do the filler work, we don't end up with a big thick edge on the edges of the doors. Now what I'm doing here is the roof, this was all in bare metal, but it still had a lot of those little black pits sitting within the metal, and that really is oxidized rust. Some of the conversions you use actually converts it to a black substance. This particular product is a removal process that actually takes the rust right out and will take it back to being just clean metal. So you leave it on overnight and it goes from that blue to the green, and then once it's just about worn out it goes fully black. And I'm just using the Merca Merlon, which is like a Scotch Brite, to scrub that out. And it's a water-based product, so you can wash it off with water. But if you leave it to the air straight away, it starts to rust really quickly. So what I've done then and what I'm doing here now is just going over with deoxidine. So PPG distribute that under the 624 number, and then that changes the structure of the metal and leaves that nice colour toning on it, but it's actually leaving a coating on the metal, and you can then paint straight over that. So if you go back and look through some of the early episodes, you'll see that. So there's Terry from PPG. So we're just giving it a quick sand. So some of these panels had sat around for a few weeks, even up to a month. And then so we deoxidine again and prep that ready to take the epoxy. And once it's been treated with that product and then washed off with water, the application goes straight over. There's no need to do any further processes, and in fact if you sand it, you take off that coating that you've created, so you've sort of wasted your time. So that was a reproduction boot, so there's no repairs needed on that. The doors, they were the factory shells with reproduction skins, and because they'd been welded and pushed and pulled a bit, they did need a bit of filler. So the reasoning for the epoxy is the epoxy seals off that bare metal and enables you to put your fillers over the top without the filler actually absorbing any moisture and taking it back through to the base to the metal. And it's something that takes a bit of getting your head around if you've always done direct to metal with your fillers, but it is the preferred option by all the manufacturers now. So once again, as you can see, the shell sitting there in bare metal. So these panels, we're trying to get enough, footage to do the episodes each fortnight, and some of these are sat around. So this has just been prep sold, ready to put the filler on. And you only really need to use that burgundy Scotch Brite to give it a tidy up to take the filler. There's no need to do any sort of heavy sanding on the epoxy. And in fact, if you're actually, I think there's an 8-hour window where you can wet your epoxy. So if you do a rub through, you can spray your epoxy on, go after lunch, come back after lunch and put your epoxy straight over without sanding. So we're just doing a little trial area here just to show the products. Most of the cars I'd skim that whole panel. And like I said, they were reproduction skins, so we were just doing where it was required, where the end of the door had been welded, it sort of pulled the metal a bit. Now this Deros sander that Terry's using here is, I found it quite good. I was struggling a bit on the outer panels because I normally do it all by hand, but I give it a good go on the firewall and it came up really good, and I'm definitely going to venture a bit more into using it, especially in the early stages of the filler work. So once your filler work's done, they're back in for another coat of epoxy. And at the same time, I'm obviously moving forward with the body shell. So you can see that's all clean now and had that 624-deoxidine process. And all cleaned off and blown off, tack rag, ready to take the epoxy. And I like to do that with a fairly fine gun, so I use a 1.4 normally because I'm not looking for build, I'm just looking to seal it up. And if you're looking for it to come out really nice and not too dry, if you use a slow thinner, it'll actually lay down really nicely. Gives you an opportunity to see what repairs you may have to do. So it's 2 full coats. Oh, there you go. So I started a 1.4 tip, 2 full coats, and this is a product that's not baked. It's a recommendation not to bake it. So the outside's done now. See underneath. So once again, Adam had put new floors in it, and there's quite a bit of new where they've done work with the chassis and stuff there. So we give that a good scuff up with some 240. And then I've used the CF Black epoxy primer. I like this product because it's paintable, whereas the other epoxy, the 616, is not. It requires a primer, where this particular product is more designed for heavy vehicle use. But it comes out with that nice sheen. Now it's not UV stable, so it's not something, it is a primer, it's not something you can leave as the finished job. And you'll see in a minute we get back to that. So I'm going from one to the other, just trying to keep myself and the boys working. So these are all now been primed, again with the 616 with the epoxy. And we're going into the polyester spray filler. So because the panels were pretty good and I'd spent a bit of extra time, I didn't mix it too heavy with the plan to put 3 medium coats on. You can thin it down so you can have it sort of, quite thin, medium and heavy. I went for the medium, and I found that was, because I had the panels pretty good, it was sufficient to do what I needed to do. If you're trying to do an engine bay or something and you haven't got your filler 100%, you could go with the heavy and put your 3 coats on. You just got to be careful not to overbuild, because it's not designed to have massive amount of coats. So the body there is now in the poly as well. So in that actual episode I was just showing where I was using the black trace on it to actually get my body lines right so I could match from side to side. And obviously while it was still in the rotisserie, I'd get those sills and all blocked out. So I'm just showing there that, I didn't put a lot on and it's just starting to come through. So I've still got a coat of primer to go on after this. So another coat of epoxy and then primer. So there's a bit more room to move, but it comes back to how good your bodywork was prior to putting this on to, how much you need to put on. So the firewall got left because I was just chasing my tail a bit, trying to get enough done for the episodes. So it then went in epoxy, and I put the poly on that as well. And that rubbed out really nice, and like I said, I was using that square electric sander on that firewall. Now the bonnet, you can see on the front edge there, it was a repo bonnet, it was fairly soft. And we did do some repairs, and I'm just pointing to those couple of low spots there. That was the bolts that were supplied with the hinges were too long. I put some dents in the underside before I got it, so I just had to do a couple of the repairs here and there. So it was epoxied first, then the repairs, now back in epoxy, and then I'd just gone with the primer prime because I had it pretty good. So I just put a couple of heavy coats on there to be able to block that out. So this is the balance of that, the poly. It looks like poly anyhow, blocking that out. So I like that size block. These panels are quite curved. You can use the long block, which you can change the shape of as well. But I've just traditionally always used this sort of size block. Enables me to sort of shape the panels a bit like sculpting really. So once again, the spray poly is porous, so it needs to be sealed up with the 616 epoxythane, and then I've put the primer on that now. But you can see now the lines are looking really good, and I like to put them out in the sun, give it a little bit of a break, and you tend to be able to see your lines really good. So now the car's up at PPG. It's the first time the guys have seen it. So I've got the majority of that all sanded out, ready to go. So all the boys jumped on. So Trev, Chris, Terry, Casey, pretty much just running around. You'd see the machine there with some 400 just to get rid of any of my scratches out of the primer. And we'd always planned to do this with a wet on wet primer. So there's a few comments about the patches. We'd used an aerosol rub through primer anywhere there was any bare metal, and you'll see the first coat of blue goes on is actually is a tinted primer. It's not actually the colour, so that's why we were able to do it. What it looks like, we haven't actually primed it, we've primed it with a tinted primer. So Mr. Clean, Terry there on the rag, just making sure he's got nothing in there. If you're looking to do something about the dust in your workshop, think about going to something like this Merca system. Now I've been using it for a long time now. It's distributed by PPG in Australia. Great product. It's not the cheapest on the market, but it's a great product, and it will help you to not only keep your workshop clean, you'll get really good results as well. So this tinted primer gives you a really good base. Once it actually sort of tacks off, it keeps a little bit of a semi-sheen to it because it's got the colour in it, and it enables you to get a good look at your panels before you actually pull the trigger on the base coat. So if you've got any little issues, you can give them a light rub. So we're fortunate up at the training centre, they've got two booths there. So this is the main booth where the shell is, and the other panels are in the open-ended booth. So the base coat, they activated that. So you can see here once again, it looks quite shiny. It's because it's activated, so they put hardener in it, and there is a formula to be able to mix it with the hardener. Just helps with the adhesion and gives you the opportunity again to get a good look at it before you pull the trigger with the colour, with the clear, sorry. So the boys are double gunning. So they use the 501 OptiClear, which is out of the Dulon range. Sorry, the Deltron range. Sunday morning here. So the option here was to do the clear, a bit like a factory type feel. Sort of went a little bit pear-shaped on the boys. It was quite a, the weather was a bit funny that day, and it came out a bit peelier than I would have liked, and when John came in he was a bit the same, and we did end up polishing it a bit more than we planned, but the plan was always to denib and give it a light 2000, 3000 polish. We ended up cutting a bit harder than that in some places to get the look we wanted, but at the same token avoiding the cost of a full resand and then a flow coat, which you would do if you're doing an elite car or a very top-end street car. So in one of those videos we're just showing the denib process, so you'll find here that we're actually going to denib a few bits just for the video and then do that same area and sand it again. The reason we've done that is primarily just for the video, but you can see in that shot there just how heavy the peel is in that area he's working in. We ended up cutting that with some hard 1000 through that area just to get those sail panels look nice and flat and more up to what I had as an expectation of something we want to sit on a stand at Summernats. The intent with this particular paint job was to try and do a paint job that's got a reasonable amount of hours but not totally over the top like a full elite, because it's getting out of control with the labour rates and all. So this car still had 3 to 400 man hours, and I didn't keep 100% check on it because the fact that we're filming and we're up at the centre and we're doing all sorts of different things with it, it's difficult to keep an exact amount of hours. But the idea is the whole job on this car would probably be a third of what you would do on what I would do on a full elite build. And the whole painting process, I'd probably spend more time polishing something like Boss XC than we did actually painting this car once we'd got to the primer stage. So there it is after a polish up there, and I've done a bit more on it since it came back to me, and it's now at Adam and Kylie's being prepped for Summernats, and it's having a bit more of a polish there. She's doing like the final make it look good polish, and that will be on show on the stand starting today when this goes to air. So we opted to do the satin black on the bonnet, and I had a few clever ideas in my mind about how I would do that, and none of it really worked out, and I ended up going back to just a hard mask with a matte clear over jet black base coat. But took me a couple of goes to get there, but in the end we got it. So the bonnet and the rear spoiler and a couple other parts up the back there ended up with a flow coat to enable us to do this. And I think that showed up when I went to polish the bonnet, that it's come up super nice because you've got a bit of extra clear to play with. So once all that got done, it came back to my place, and I backmasked all of that top and did the underside. So I've used Stone Guard on that. So that's one of Car Builder's products. And then put a black base coat over that because it's a paintable product. And then the clear coat on that GRS clear system. It's a really hardy clear. I like the finish because I can mix those two together to get that nice satin black. Looks very factory looking. But I did something different on the engine bay. So all of the stuff there, I used a product out of the Delfleet range. And the reason for that is, and it's something that probably more so in a shop, the product does come in fairly big packaging, but it's direct to metal. So with a chassis, you can go straight over the chassis with it, with the primer, and then wet on wet with your satin black. So you thin the booth once, comes out really nice satin finish in the black. So I did all of the internal parts with that to get that engine bay all looking similar. The outside of the car, the bumpers and the headlight surrounds and the taillight surrounds and all were done with that 8115, 8117 out of the Deltron range matte. It's a very, very serviceable product, and I've used it in the past and I really like it. So the car's looking good here. It'll look way better once it's down a bit and on some wheels, and it'll be like that at Summernats on the stand. And then I will follow up with Perry's Garage in the future as they start putting the car together, but it's got to have all the trim and that done yet, so it'll be some months as that progresses. So if you haven't watched all the series, this may prompt you to go and do that. If you have, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you've subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, do so. We're doing another full series this year with PPG, Merca and Sada, and also with Lovell. So we've got a whole year, good year ahead. So hopefully you can join us. Bye for now.